Hello and Happy New Year. If you follow the Sebastian Rogers case, you probably already know that a lawyer who was heavily promoted as counsel for the plaintiffs in the RICO lawsuit filed by the plaintiffs is not, in fact, providing legal counsel in the case. In this video, I'm going to talk about why this one choice by Joseph Lesniak, who is a licensed officer of the court in the state of Pennsylvania, rings a decisive death knell for the survival of the entire RICO action, in my opinion. Here you are looking at one of 3 different emails Bruce Castor sent to various parties confirming that he is, in fact, not involved in the lawsuit. It says, "Gentlemen, please take notice that I do not represent Mr. Chapman in any legal action in Pennsylvania. I represent him relative to a matter in the state of Texas only. As I consider both of you friends and colleagues, I would hope that any misunderstanding in that regard is corrected, and the court, counsel, and litigants are aware of my non-involvement. I would rather not do anything official to draw attention to this issue, and I hope, Mr. Lesniak, that you will see to it that no one thinks I am representing Mr. Chapman in your pending action in Delaware County. Thank you for considering my request demand." I know that sounds like a very politely worded correspondence, but when a lawyer says to another lawyer, "I demand that you do something," that other lawyer needs to take notice. Lawyers don't say, "Hey, phew, take my name off." They say, I request/demand that you do this, okay? Mr. Castor is one of Dog the Bounty Hunter's lawyers and also happens to be fairly well reputed. He is a former district attorney and he represented President Donald Trump in his second impeachment. Now, why do I know all these things about Mr. Castor? Well, obviously it's easy to look up, but also it was drilled into my head by several channels that went live as soon as this lawsuit was filed, and they prominently promoted his name as counsel to plaintiffs. And when they went live to wail and whoop about this, they talked about how this adds so much heft and credibility to the RICO filing, and some people just should shut their mouths and move on at this point, just by virtue of the fact that this particular man was included as counsel to plaintiffs in this proceeding. That is how incredibly misleading that entire action was.
For immediate release, Operation Sebastian Stormfront, October 18, 2024, news conferences announcing legal action related to the disappearance of Sebastian Wayne Drake Rogers. Counsel for the plaintiff includes attorneys Joseph P. Lesniak, Esquire, and Bruce L. Castor, Jr. Do you guys know who Bruce Castor is? Lean in. I didn't know he was on this. Actions aim to protect the civil liberties that he and those support him deserve. That is a quote. That's a quote from him.
It's 1000% serious, and these attorneys are legit.
Especially someone like Bruce Castor. Bruce Castor and Joseph Lesniak. Look at their credentials and their record. If you think for 1 minute that these attorneys are going to sign their name onto a case that they didn't think had merit, you got another thing coming. These attorneys aren't high profile and well known for no reason.
Bruce Castor, Google them, look them up first.
Legal counsel for the plaintiffs includes attorney Joseph P. Lesniak, Esquire, and Bruce L. Castor. Well-respected attorney. He most famously represented Donald Trump in one of the impeachment hearings.
And he would love nothing more than Lesniak and what's the other attorney's name? I done forgot it. Damn it.
Bruce Castor.
Yeah, Bruce Castor. He would love come on, he would love nothing more than for Lesniak Castor to come after him. It gets his name out there. This is a big deal, and he knows that.
And that's, there's 2 sides to every story. But I assure you, there's no way in hell that I would call Bruce Castor a joke, because I don't think he's a joke.
So for those channels, it's definitely egg on their face to realize that this man, Bruce Castor, is not a party to this action. And It can be some delicious schadenfreude for those of us who already knew this RICO action had no chance of surviving. But now that these channels have seen this communication from Mr. Castor, confirming that he's not involved, they've treated this as like a little oopsie doopsie. Guess we just need to make some edits on the paperwork. Sorry, folks. But in the law, that's not how it works. This is not an oopsie doopsie. This is your lawsuit's Titanic. Okay? Joseph Lesniak, your plaintiff's attorney, is hamstrung by laws governing legal representation and misrepresentation. And on top of that, as an officer of the court and a member of the bar in the state of Pennsylvania, he is obliged, unless he wants to lose his license and lose his reputation, he is obliged to follow stringent rules of professional conduct and adhere to local rules governing how legal papers are filed. I'm going to read some of those rules to you a bit later, but in other words, by the time Mr. Lesniak filed those papers in court displaying Mr. Castor's name on the header, knowing that Mr. Castor is not providing legal representation in this case, he knew he was violating several laws and rules governing his professional conduct, and that by violating these rules, he was jeopardizing the health and credibility of the case before it was even filed or served to the plaintiffs. Okay. Now let me put an even finer point on this. Okay. Even if everything the plaintiffs say in the filing is true and correct, and all of it can be proved, and all that alleged RICO activity can be substantiated, the lawyer they chose to represent them completely screwed them out of their chances at any justice by choosing to misrepresent Mr. Castor's role in the case. And even if you want to give Mr. Lesniak the benefit of the doubt and say that he believed Mr. Castor was representing the plaintiffs when he filed those documents, I'm going to tell you why that benefit should not be given, because it is totally against every social and professional rule of conduct to put someone else's name on a sworn legal document without them knowing it or getting a chance to review that document. It's pretty clear from these emails that we've seen from Mr. Castor that he is not, and most likely has never been, a member of this legal team. Now, shall I explain in more depth and with legal citations why I believe this tanks the case? Happy to oblige. Lawyers who are barred or licensed to practice in any state in the United States of America are subject to very specific and very stringent ethical and legal codes of conduct to ensure that things like this don't happen. When Mr. Lesniak made an affirmative choice as a licensed attorney to include Bruce Castor's name in several written documents and in press releases announcing a press conference that never ended up happening, he either knew he was breaking all these laws and rules, or he didn't know, and that alone is major problem for this case. I keep talking about these rules, right? Well, let me show them to you so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm just using screenshots, for my citations from a variety of sources. So if you want to review the actual laws and rules yourself, I've included links in the description below. This local court rule is probably the one that Mr. Lesniak most openly and obviously flouted and should know as a practicing attorney in Pennsylvania. An attorney at law shall be deemed the attorney of record for a party if and only if the attorney files with the magisterial district court a written statement acknowledging that he or she represents the party in the proceeding. In order for Mr. Castor to be officially recognized in Pennsylvania as representing plaintiffs in this case, he needed to have filed a notice of appearance. And that did not happen. And here's part of number 10 in the rules of professional conduct. The lawyer's own interests should not be permitted to have an adverse effect on representation of a client. For example, if the probity of a lawyer's own conduct in a transaction is in serious question, it may be difficult or impossible for the lawyer to give a client detached advice. This may not be directly applicable, but what this basically says is that when a lawyer's own conduct is in question in the case that he's representing, he is now conflicted out. More from the rules of professional conduct. A lawyer shall not make a false or misleading communication about the lawyer or the lawyer's services. A communication is false or misleading if it contains material misrepresentation of fact or law, or admits a fact necessary to make a statement considered as a whole not materially misleading. And then bouncing down to number 2, statements that are misleading are also prohibited by this rule. A truthful statement is misleading if it omits a fact necessary to make the lawyer's communication considered as a whole not materially misleading. A truthful statement is also misleading if a substantial likelihood exists that it will lead a reasonable person, in other words, the court of public opinion, to formulate a specific conclusion about the lawyer or the lawyer's services for which there is no reasonable factual foundation. So basically this goes to Joseph Lesniak knew that when Bruce Castor's name was put not only on the facing page of legal sworn documents, but also in press releases and his quotes put in press releases, he was misleading us to believe, us generally reasonable people out here to believe, that Bruce Castor was involved in this case. This here is a Pennsylvania state statute which applies to all persons in the state of Pennsylvania, but especially to lawyers, because they are expected to know these laws. They can't flinch by saying, oh, I didn't know that was a law. In general, a person commits a misdemeanor of the second degree if, with the intent to mislead a public servant, the public servant here is a court, in performing his official function, he makes any written false statements which he does not believe to be true. 2, submits or invites reliance on any writing which he knows to be forged, altered, or otherwise lacking in authenticity. And B, a person commits a misdemeanor of the third degree if he makes a written false statement which he does not believe to be true on or pursuant to a form bearing notice authorized by law to the effect that false statements made therein are punishable. Pennsylvania State Code 4903 on false swearing says that false swearing in official matters is when a person who makes a false statement under oath or equivalent affirmation or swears or affirms the truth of such a statement previously made when he does not believe the statement to be true is guilty of a misdemeanor of the second degree if the falsification occurs in an official proceeding, such as a lawsuit, or the falsification is intended to mislead a public servant, the court, in performing his official function. B, other false swearing. A person who makes a false statement under oath or equivalent affirmation swears or affirms the truth of such statement previously made when he does not believe the statement to be true is guilty of a misdemeanor in the third degree if the statement is one which is required by law to be sworn or affirmed before a notary or other person authorized to administer oaths. Do you get it now? This is a shit sandwich. I can't tell you exactly how and when this case will die, and when it dies, I doubt we will have the full story of how it actually happened, regardless of the reason given for why it dies. But I can tell you that there are several ways this could possibly happen. It could be that Mr. Lesniak realizes he made an existentially terrible decision in this case and decides to remove himself from it, or to just allow the case to die in the vine and hope that no one notices. It could be that the minute a real person at a real court actually reads all the papers in this lawsuit and sees that a lawyer's name was errantly included in a sworn legal document or several sworn legal documents, they will flush the case down the toilet right then and there. But I can't guarantee that. So let's say that Mr. Lesniak is able to somehow persuade the court not to penalize the lawsuit due to his action, and they proceed ahead anyway, and litigation continues. the case will proceed with a huge stain on the credibility of Lesniak and the plaintiffs. The baggage of what Lesniak did to mislead people into believing a high-powered attorney was on the case will be baked in while the court attempts to make sense of the claims in the filings themselves, which, in my opinion, are a bunch of salacious claims that are not backed up by any proof. But let's face it, we know that the court of public opinion is much more important to AtNight Media, Dog the Bounty Hunter, and the plaintiffs, right? And that they're just shamefully using the resources of the court as a tool to generate more content, to give them more falsely assumed authority for the court of public opinion. Well, how is this case doing in the court of public opinion?
I bet Castor didn't even know his name was used this many times. I bet he had no fucking clue his name was used this many times on social media, that he was representing all of these people. Maybe he did. I don't think so.
As a public relations expert who's been monitoring the sentiment of the court of public opinion for over 25 years, as a representative of very big and very small companies, I declare this publicity stunt, squirrel suit, an unmitigated disaster. The public does not like their intelligence to be insulted. And this squirrel suit has been an assault on the intelligence of thinking people ever since it was filed. It actually hurts sometimes to witness the stupidity represented in the constant flow of communications coming out of AtNight Media and the communications that flow from AtNight Media to the various channels that just literally repeat everything they say as if there's some authority behind it. All in the name of Sebastian Rogers. And here, right here, is undisputed evidence that the AtNight team knows they're in the middle of a disaster. In the last 48 hours, they've been using an old PR tactic we call flooding the zone to try to flush away any online communications or information that contradicts their disinformation. I mean, just look at this. AtNight has posted 11 urgent, immediate news releases within the last 48 hours. All of them are riddled with threats and intimidation that are obviously designed to create intense fear in their opponents. That's called flooding the zone. It's also called systematic gishgallop, but that's a whole other video. But to what end? Right now, I'm going to slowly scroll through these posts so you can see them as I make this last point here. I'm not going to read them because they're way too long, they're way too repetitive, and frankly, way too full of disinformation. So I don't want to give that too much of a voice. But my understanding is that AtNight Intelligence and Dog the Bounty Hunter were retained for the search of Sebastian Rogers. Tell me, how do any of these posts assist in the effort to find Sebastian Rogers? Why is Sebastian Rogers' name connected to an urgent escalation of resources to find the identities of people who may or may not be buggering AtNight, rather than escalating their resources to look for Sebastian Rogers? I'm open to your thoughts in the comments, but I believe they are flooding the zone with completely irrelevant, salacious, distracting Twitter posts because they are on their back heels and they know it. A plaintiff in their lawsuit is due in criminal court in a few days.
Social media influencer Bullhorn Betty began posting videos about the case. In July, Sebastian's mother filed an order of protection against her. The following month, Betty, whose real name is Andra Griffin, was arrested for violating that order. All of that brings us to today.
I'm sure they're very, very conscious of that. They've been openly and royally humiliated by Mr. Lesniak's apparent choice to flout the rules of professional conduct. And there's a very vocal lawsuit opponent on Twitter who credibly debunks and hilariously debunks practically every AtNight claim and post, making them look like complete and utter bozos who take themselves way too seriously. Shout out to SF Investigates. So sure, flood the zone. Since this lawsuit doesn't seem to be working, go ahead and try to wash over everyone else's freedom of speech so only your voice is heard. That may work for a short time. Yeah, maybe a little bit of time. But long term, in my opinion, you're already done, son. Just hang it up. Allegedly, in my opinion. Thank you so much for watching. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, and have a fantastic new year. Peace out.